In the fading twilight of a vast empire, a legend was born from a whisper. The year is 323 BC. In the opulent palace of Nebuchadnezzar II in Babylon, the undisputed master of the known world, Alexander the Great, lies on his deathbed. Ravaged by a mysterious fever, the 32-year-old conqueror, who had wept for there were no more worlds to conquer, was finally facing an enemy he could not defeat: his own mortality. His generals, the very men who had marched with him from the fields of Macedon to the banks of the Indus River, gathered around him. These were the Diadochi, the successors. Men of immense ambition and proven martial prowess, like Perdiccas, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. The air was thick with tension, not just with grief, but with the unspoken question that hung over the largest empire the world had ever seen. Who would inherit it all? The story, as passed down through millennia, is dramatic, almost theatrical. As Alexander's breath grew shallow, one of his generals, perhaps Perdiccas, leaned in close and asked the fateful question, "To whom do you leave your kingdom?" With his last ounce of strength, Alexander is said to have uttered two words that would ignite half a century of war. To the strongest. Kratis toi. It's a powerful story. A fittingly epic final line for a man whose life was the very definition of epic. It paints a picture of Alexander, even in death, setting one last, ultimate contest for his followers. A challenge that would test their strength, cunning, and ambition, just as he had tested them throughout his campaigns. But is it true? Did Alexander the Great really condemn his own empire to chaos with his dying breath? Or is this one of history's most enduring and dramatic myths? To unravel this mystery, we must travel back, not just to that fateful day in Babylon, but through the murky and often contradictory accounts of ancient historians. Our primary sources for Alexander's life and death were written centuries after the events they describe. Historians like Arrian, Plutarch, Diodorus Siculus, and Quintus Curtius Rufus all relied on earlier, now lost, contemporary accounts. These included the official court journals, known as the Ephemerides, and the memoirs of men who were actually there, like Alexander's general, Ptolemy, and his admiral, Nearchus. The problem is, each of these later historians had his own perspective, his own biases, and his own narrative to craft. They were writing for a Roman audience, often using Alexander's story to comment on their own times. This is where the story of "To the Strongest" begins to get complicated. Interestingly, our most reliable and sober historian, Arrian, who based his work heavily on Ptolemy's first-hand account, makes no mention of this famous phrase. Neither does Plutarch, who was more interested in character and morality than a play-by-play of events. Instead, their accounts suggest a more pragmatic, if less dramatic, scene. They describe Alexander, too weak to speak, taking his signet ring from his finger and handing it to Perdiccas, his most senior cavalry commander and trusted regent. This act, the passing of the ring, was a clear and established symbol of delegated authority in the ancient world. It didn't necessarily mean Perdiccas was the new king, but it designated him as the regent, the steward of the empire, until a proper heir could be determined. At the time, Alexander's wife, Roxana, was pregnant. The logical and traditional Macedonian course of action would be to wait for the child's birth. If it was a boy, he would be king, with Perdiccas ruling in his name. This was the plan Perdiccas himself initially advocated for. So where did "to the strongest" come from? The phrase appears most prominently in the works of Diodorus Siculus and Quintus Curtius Rufus, who were known for their more sensational and dramatic style of history. They were writing stories meant to captivate an audience. What's more dramatic than a dying king setting his ambitious lieutenants against one another? It's highly probable that the story was a piece of posthumous propaganda. a justification for the brutal wars that followed. The wars of the Diadochi were a chaotic and bloody free-for-all, where Alexander's generals carved up his empire for themselves. By claiming that Alexander himself had declared a contest for the strongest, each general could legitimize his own violent bid for power. It was no longer a treacherous betrayal of the royal line. It was the fulfillment of their master's final wish. Think of it from Ptolemy's perspective in Egypt, or Seleucus's in Persia. By promoting this story, they could frame their own secession and kingdom-building not as an act of rebellion, but as them proving they were, in fact, the strongest. It's a masterful piece of political spin that has echoed through the ages. Furthermore, we must consider Alexander's physical condition. The accounts describe him as being racked with fever, in immense pain, and having lost his voice. The idea that he could clearly articulate a phrase, even a short one, is questionable. Some scholars have proposed a fascinating alternative theory based on a simple misinterpretation. The Greek word for "to the strongest" is kratistoi. A very similar-sounding name is Crateroi, or Craterus. Craterus was one of Alexander's most loyal and respected generals. At the time of Alexander's death, Craterus was on his way back to Macedonia with 10,000 retiring veterans. Is it possible that Alexander, with his last gasp, was not setting up a contest, but was trying to name his preferred regent? Was he saying, "to Craterus"? A dying man's mumble, "Crateroi," could easily have been heard, or deliberately misheard, as "Kratistoi" by those present, especially by Perdiccas, who stood to lose everything if Craterus was named regent. This theory provides a plausible, less theatrical explanation for the events. It fits the political context and the physical reality of a man on his deathbed. Ultimately, whether Alexander said "to the strongest," "to Craterus," or simply handed over his ring in silence, the outcome was the same. The centrifugal forces of personal ambition were too powerful to be contained. The empire was too vast, its generals too powerful, and the royal line too vulnerable. Alexander's true legacy was not an empire destined for a single heir, but a world shattered and then remade in his image by his successors. The Hellenistic age, an era of Greek culture spreading across the East, was born not from a single command, but from the violent, chaotic, and creative aftermath of his death. So, the phrase "to the strongest" is almost certainly a myth. But it is a powerful myth, one that encapsulates the spirit of the age that followed. It's a testament to how history is not just about what happened, but about the stories we tell about what happened. In the end, Alexander's final words weren't an order, but a prophecy. Whether he uttered them or not, his empire did indeed go to the strongest. Thanks for watching. If you're fascinated by the mysteries of the ancient world, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more journeys into history. We'll see you next time.